Man, there's some tense air in Blacksburg. Anxiety over on the message boards. Gotta loosen up the collar a little bit. And all to think that Virginia Tech's on a bye week this week. As we welcome you back into another live edition of Kolby's Corner, coming to you here live from Blacksburg, Virginia, on Monday, November 3rd, year of our Lord 2025. Any news this weekend? As we'll jump into the coaching search and the main topic of James Franklin and what we're hearing on the situation. Appreciate all the support on the show. Programming note, want to apologize for the technical difficulties on the live stream after the game on Saturday night. But, as we'll devolve into tonight, maybe for the better as it all works out, and got some intel actually right after that show on some pretty big intel pertaining to James Franklin and Virginia Tech. Going to go as long as this show takes. So make sure to jump in the live chat, dump any questions, go on a little talk about James Franklin, and then try and touch on a lot of questions, because I know there's a lot of questions out there. Still a lot up in the air, but we'll touch on as much as we can tonight. So appreciate all the support on the show. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, head over to vtscoop.com. You want to talk about active? Man, I'm supposed to have classes. I'm supposed to go to networking talk events, as you saw over there. But make sure to subscribe to the channel, subscribe to vtscoop.com as we wade in the waters of this coaching search. But jumping right into things, the topic of discussion, James Franklin and Virginia Tech. Obviously, some news over the weekend that came out on vtscoop.com, and I feel it's prudent to get into now. Late Saturday night after the game and after I went live, there got some very solid intel that James Franklin visited Blacksburg, Virginia to look at houses within the past week. And then that was corroborated Sunday morning. No better alarm clock before heading on the way to service and getting a wake-up phone call from Evan G. Watkins, sort of confirming, talking about the exact same thing there with that at James Franklin looking into houses. So make sure to get over to vtscoop.com for all those scoops. It's the best place to be for all this. But when you hear that, amidst other things, and we'll get into a lot of different things, but very rare. And I feel like, honestly, I should probably preface by saying, I know there's other people out there that feel like a deal is done or in place. There's some pretty powerful power brokers in this whole ordeal that got some hands on the wheel, and I'm pretty confident no deal is in place yet. So I know some people are projecting or saying some things in place. While there's a lot of positive signs, and we'll get into that with visiting houses and talking to different staff and talking to recruits, nothing is concrete as of yet. And I think that's where a lot of the anxiety is coming in, both on the committee, the board, stakeholders, shareholders, donors, because there is just still a lot of gray space where you feel like you've been down that road before. And until the fat lady sings, the ball's in their court, and it just feels like, not to say another Jim Knowles situation, but it just feels like you've been led down that road before. But anyway, just prefacing that, circling back on the housing search. Yeah, obviously going in incognito mode to Blacksburg. And it sounds like multiple times now, at least two, to go and look at houses in the area, which is obviously a very positive sign for Virginia Tech's camp of someone who's interested in the job. Let alone when you talk about Virginia Tech has met all demands and even raised. Obviously, they've come to the negotiating table, gone back, and had to raise again a couple times on different capacities. Salary is very competitive. And I think especially a big component that it sounds like was maybe a snag that they definitely worked through was with the staff support salary. James Franklin has a very large staff. Obviously, the facilities up in Happy Valley are very expansive, can house a large number of support staff members. And if James Franklin were to come here, that's something that's going to be very, very important to him. So obviously that's something that they wanted to get ironed down. It sounds like they were able to come to grips with that. And now it's just, are you getting strung out? And is it going to keep sort of coming back to the well on different topics? And I think that's where they wanted to draw a hard line in the sand. And I know people were saying over on the board that Monday was always supposed to be that hard line in the sand day, where this was sort of where you stick the picket fence in and go from there. But it's just, it is November 3rd. It is still unprecedented. And then you get into the whole pivot conversation. You have a committee of 8 people, and it's like half want to pivot, half want to stay on. And I'm not saying those are the numbers, but how do you come to a consensus when some people feel you've got to draw a hard line and say, okay, this is where we're at. If you don't meet it here by this time, then we got to go do what's in our best interest and go vet and prepare other offers and such for other people. So that's sort of where it's at, where they feel like they've met all the demands. And I think just from a third party, just so calling it how I'm seeing it, Virginia Tech is in a very great spot. You don't have people visiting your school looking for houses, obviously, if they don't feel very attracted to the job. We've heard from different recruits and players that they've been contacted by James Franklin, gauging interest on a potential following him to Virginia Tech. Now, if that's just following him wherever or potentially following him to Virginia Tech, we've heard staff members being contacted by James Franklin, potentially about staying with current people on the staff, potentially about coming, obviously with new different staff members. As if people are just jumping in here, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and dump questions in live chat. We'll get to those all at the end. We'll go to midnight if we have to. It sort of feels like the vibe over on vtscoop.com right now, just threads and threads. But they've met all demands multiple times. So and I reiterated this a ton on the last show, and I think it still is the same. The ball is in the court of James Franklin and Jimmy Sexton. They've really left nothing on the table, and now it's just not who's going to blink. I think Virginia Tech, they just are where they are. And he's obviously their top choice, someone that would immediately come in and raise the stature of Virginia Tech's program at a pretty critical time, bringing top talent. And no one else is going to come in and be able to flip this just on field immediately as Virginia Tech would, just with timing of things, timing of the hire and the infrastructure he'd be able to build out, let alone before December, if this were to go down. I'm still under the impression if this is going to happen, it's going to happen semi sooner than later, but then there's some really, really positive things like we touched on. Like, I don't know what other bullet points, like the salary, you meet all demands, touring different houses in the area. Like that is preposterous. You come into town multiple times to look at that, checking in on staff, checking in on recruits, but it's just, you never really know until the fat lady sings. And it's one of those deals where, are you going to wait till a November 15, 16, 17 date? It's just because I don't think it's going to be. We've heard things, and even throughout today, it sounds like there was back and forth and very positive. Like it keeps being a little snag and then really, really positive remarks. But then there's certain things where I just don't see it with the really powerful brokers in the situation. I don't see an announcement coming in the next couple of days because of just different things coming downstream from them. So you can take everything with a grain of salt and say, okay, there's still a ton of positive momentum here, but where's the breaking point going to be? Because you're just looking at everything and you hear it from one person who's obviously very connected on the phone, literally right up until we click go live on these every night. It's been a very, very busy time, obviously covering this coaching search, and with everything, everyone is very, very involved and interested in seeing where Virginia Tech goes next. So I think that's a lot of it, but Virginia Tech can feel rest assured they've met all demands. They've come to the table with everything they have and more. And I think that people will be very surprised if it will come to fruition. And just third party taking it, I still do think a deal gets done. Now, obviously, that's pure speculation. People want to say that it is done or they've agreed in principle. I would strike that out. There's definitely still some big moves to be made there. There's a lot of positive momentum. And I think VT Scoop been ahead of it on a lot of this, where other people have sort of pivoted off their initial timelines. I think it would be sooner than later, as we live in unprecedented times, and they're going to try to wrap this up. It's just really up to James Franklin on when he sort of puts his foot down and says, okay, enough's enough. This is where we're at. Salary, obviously heard the reports of being on campus, touring different houses in the area, which is big. Heard his wife came into town. So I wouldn't expect a press conference or anything like that soon. I know people were even saying as soon as the basketball game tonight or as soon as tonight. And I know Monday was always going to be that deadline day, or the deadline day, or whatever it was made up to be. But it just, I would push this back to maybe midweek a little bit. There's still a lot of really positive stuff. But CAA and Jimmy Sexton, they're not going to be put in a corner. They're going to leverage this thing. But I think a really important thing that obviously people aren't blind to is what other jobs are going to be able or field legitimate interest in James Franklin. And I think that's really big. Virginia Tech's not foolish to understand that. So I think just watching Jimmy Sexton and knowing he's going to keep asking for more time, trying to keep leverage a little bit more, it's just going to come down to James Franklin. So I know I come on here, I sound like a broken record, but the new intel of obviously being in Blacksburg can validate and confirm those reports. And obviously hearing some back channeling to staff and recruits about gauging potential interest in following him to his next stop. If they do have to pivot off that, heard some news. Obviously, Bob Chesney has been a really hot name. I'm not sure he's exactly that top guy, but I feel like he would definitely be in that list. Don't know how far I'm going to devolve into what we've heard on that maybe second tier list. As I said, I did go just on the record a second ago and say it does feel like this will eventually get done. Not sure in what capacity or time frame. This is just based on everything I'm hearing before this and today. There's just too much positive momentum going in this search to feel any way differently. But if you do want to look at that backup group, they've obviously vetted some candidates. Chesney's on that list. I've been really, really high on a certain candidate. That would be my top choice. I don't think he would end up in Blacksburg anyway, but it sounds like someone who could be in line for an SEC job that just opened that I've been high on, and maybe another guy that Virginia Tech's just going to have to row the boat down the stream if they miss on Franklin. So take that with what you will. Those are some of the backups, but talking to staff members, recruits, obviously getting the family on board, getting the wife, obviously the kids, family, and then how that staff's going to look. I think that's big. NIL's there, and then getting the committee all on board if they do want to pivot off Franklin, who is obviously their top target, or move to the backup options, and if they want to do that. So that's kind of where we're at. But I would reiterate, I don't believe a deal is done. There's some pretty large powered brokers that would have different plans and things in the works, I believe, if it were to go. But we'll see. I still think this is something that could happen here soon. Maybe a show there on Wednesday. But I'm not saying that's a date, but just potentially as soon as then, or it could drag out. And it's going to be really interesting to see if it does prolong how Virginia Tech plays this. Because Jimmy Saxon is going to be more than comfortable to wait, even though they might not have legitimate contenders right now. And that's sort of what it sounds like, that there's really not much out there that is advantageous to James Franklin. Maybe they're receiving some interest, but is it going to be as good of a situation? I doubt that, even just looking at it from a neutral party. So I think cooler heads will prevail. I think this will get done. It's just obviously there is that tenseness in the air, as I led the show with in Blacksburg, the anxiety on the message board until it does wrap up, because these things, there's always twists and turns. But yeah, I think watching the competitors and different things. Before we get into questions, I feel like that touches on a lot of the scoop of the day. I know that was a little disjointed, but we're really just going to get into the questions and try and clear the air on as much as we know right now, as much as we can say. But make sure to go check out vtscoop.com. The message boards have been so active. I know a lot of it is not coaching scoop related, but I know people are thoroughly enjoying themselves, even in the chaos and the anxiety of it all over there. So it's a great community. Check out vtscoop.com. Growing every day as the coaching search ticks on. One programming note, Josh Pittman out of Kings Fork High School in Suffolk, Virginia, decommitted about an hour and a half ago before the show. Also worth noting, there was a basketball game right before the show, but a lot of this all seems asinine, obviously, with the coaching search really, really heating up. It's a very, very hot button issue. Dominates a lot of the time these days, but because it's crazy. You talk to people in the agent world, they've almost been talking like it's been done for quite some time. But I think there's still going to be a few more twists and turns on this ride. So just hold on for the ride. Stay locked into vtscoop.com. Have the moderators' messages turned on. We're going to try and give you as much as we can as soon as possible. And I don't think there's been another outlet who's been on this coaching search and James Franklin like the crew over at vtscoop.com. They've done an amazing job. So shout out to them. With that, I'm going to just go through these questions, kind of just old school style. So make sure to dump them in here. Going to try and touch on everything I can. Appreciate all the support on the show. I know the technical difficulties the other night were sort of tough, but appreciate the support. And yeah, I think that's most of the notes. So let's get into this. Come on, Kolby, give us some good news. Well, I think the good news was sort of saying, like, I do think they will eventually get this deal done. I think eventually James Franklin will agree. I think both sides will come to the table, and I just there's too much there. Granted, I haven't been covering college football for the longest time. Hand up, I call out my youth there, but it's just there's so much going on that would be so atypical to a search at any institution that there's just too much positive momentum. And I know there's hangups and things that you hear about, and people will freak out at the smallest little derailment. But I think you have to feel really great about where Virginia Tech has positioned themselves and what they continue to do to try and better their position, which I think is done a really great job by the committee considering the circumstances. My guess is VT got played and is being used for leverage. If we do get it, will it be overpaid? I mean, I think people at Virginia Tech, I think people even on the committee feel like almost to a certain extent they could be getting played. That is obviously a really big fear, not only when dealing with Sexton, but when you're dealing with such a high profile client and deal and organization that you can't not feel like that. You can feel like, are we being leveraged for him for another job? And he's going to try and backdoor another client into our lap. You look back to South Carolina, is that a Shane deal? Is that something like, I think that's a fear that people have to keep in mind. Like, this thing's not done. There's a lot of really good positive momentum, but is it just a big circus show? So they're weighing that. And that's why I think they are going to draw that hard line in the sand, because they don't really want to be taken for fools. And I'm not saying they are, but like they don't want to be on the short side of that stick or draw the short straw. Here we go. Just getting through. Was the Monday deadline real? I think I heard there were some spirited discussions today between people obviously involved and Sexton. Maybe they went back and forth a little bit. How real was that deadline? Obviously, Sexton had all the leverage to say, okay, we'll wait. It's November 3rd. But I think they were, they brought a real feeling to the table of saying, okay, this is where we're at. And we're not going to be taken for this to just be dragged out for weeks and weeks, multiple weeks. Like I said, if this is to get done, I would expect sooner than later. Sooner is not a day or 12 hours. It's just, I don't see this as something that can drag on for 20 days or something. If at that point, I would start to feel a lot less confident and start to look at some of those backup options. I think there was a pretty real deadline to start to see some stuff coming out here in this midweek. And I think that's what you started to see with things ramping up, different texts, and a growing sense of unrest just overall. Agents, people, fans, coaches, players, just a lot of unrest. So it's to get something you never had, you have to do something you never done. You're living in uncommon times. So it's just a lot of unknown, and you have someone who's done it a lot brokering the whole deal. So be very interesting to see how it turns out. We'll try and have the best coverage for you here and on vtscoop.com. Where did James Franklin stay in Blacksburg? This isn't New York City where they can drive him into the garage at the Four Seasons. So that's a good question. I'm not so sure that he did stay in Blacksburg, Virginia. It's just the fact that I know he visited here. There were the lights on in Lane Stadium one night. I think they drove him straight under Lane that night to go check out the stadium. And obviously Fuente and Pride, they lived in Blacksburg proper. Heard potentially looking at houses just outside of the region, maybe a little bit. But that's, like I said, that's not as confirmed. Can just confirm he was here on campus, checking things out in the region with members, obviously very actively close to the search. Do you think Mehul saying it was a nice day in the Berg was anything of substance? Yeah, I think it was a great thing of substance. Mehul had a great fireside chat at the Day of Data Symposium at the Moss Art Center, which it will always be to me, not the newly named Center for the Arts. Obviously very philanthropic to the school. So take everything Mehul says at face value. But yeah, I think it was a really nice day in Blacksburg. This is a little tough. Like, you've heard some names, but it's so preliminary. As I said, people think a deal is already agreed in principle or verbal or whatever. I don't think that is the case. Now, he's gauged interest from different players and staff, and I think he will have an overwhelming amount being ready and willing to jump with him. It's just certain names at this point. I think that's going to have to play itself out a little bit. Checking the live chat here. Appreciate everyone jumping in here, just trying to find Dealing with some Wi-Fi issues, man. We got to get a producer for the show. We got to get some Wi-Fi. What's your confidence with the search for Franklin to be the next head coach? Like, I don't know if you want to put a number on that. Like, as things stand right now, I think you have to feel very good and that you've done everything possible on the Virginia Tech side. I mean, times in the past you can look and say you left things on the table, you didn't go all in, you didn't push all your chips in, and it obviously led to not the success that you wanted. But Virginia Tech can confidently say they haven't left anything on the table. I think they've done a very thorough search. I mean, honestly, hats off in the whole ordeal as to where it was looking in different regards. Obviously, restructuring some of the athletic department. I think that's even a fair gripe of maybe a snag, maybe not a snag, but of Franklin probably bringing his staff. You know, you talk about the GM position. He obviously has longstanding ties there on the personnel world and probably bring his crew in and that. But who's going to be that athletic CEO, as they've touched on? A little indecision there, obviously, with looking like Whit Babcock's time there. It's going to be winding down a lot of those administrators' time, winding down. Just obviously indecision on who's going to be operating the department. That could be an element in this that is still a little bit up in the air, as you can't have a concrete, like if you can't have a concrete answer on the head coach, you also don't have a concrete answer there on how they're going to fill out the department. But I think Virginia Tech has to feel pretty good overall with where things stand. So you think they'll get it done though? Like as of right now, I feel decently confident they get this across the finish line, but there are still reservations. It's just how does Sexton play this? You don't want to be the pawn in this whole deal, and it's you draw too hard of a line too early and then play yourself out of him. Because Franklin is obviously the top target on the board for Virginia Tech. It's just, is it going to be November 15th or November 25th? And how long are they going to be willing to wait? Because I don't think they're going to just sit on their hands and have their hands tied. So I think that's going to be just sort of the whole ordeal. Appreciate everyone in the live chat trying to sift through the memes and everything. Obviously, very active community over from VT Scoop over here watching. A lot of inside memes there. Does meeting all demands mean overpayment? No denying he will be better for Virginia Tech than they are now, but is he truly worth it? I feel like that question's in the eye of the beholder. That's in the eye of the donors, the committee, and obviously when you step up to the table and you redirect the amount of money that you are from the university to athletics, I think it shows everyone that you're very serious about athletics and it's important to your university as a whole. What it means for admissions, what it means for Burris, what is overpaying? Like, I think the market, they obviously want to use Franklin to sort of reset the market ahead of this massive coaching carousel. I know he was just fired from Penn State at the $8+ million contract. Obviously, he's going to come to Virginia Tech on a deal more expensive than that. I know some people, that's obviously preposterous. Hey, he was just fired from an institution like that. Why? It's just the way this is going to get done. Virginia Tech's going to have to pay that premium. He's a very quality head coach. This guy's won a Rose, Fiesta Cotton Bowl, a Big Ten championship. I know he was in the semifinals last year. This is someone who can come in and pretty much instantly raise where Virginia Tech's football stature is in a time where it really has to if you want to be in that dance for the long term of conference realignment. And I think people finally in Burris and on the board sort of understand the importance of that moving forward. So I think that's a big element of it. Overpaying, we'll see. I think a big thing actually that to bring up is that buyout structure, because that's a really big thing, and I'm glad I mentioned it. How that buyout structure is going to be made, because that could be a massive snack in why this whole ordeal goes down. Because obviously, when you put up that contract, not to say things will go downhill, but if they do, Virginia Tech would be devastated if they were to have to eat a buyout comparable to some of these that have just happened elsewhere. So I think that is really big in talks and discussions with obviously Sexton and the committee, and how this contract is going to be structured is that buyout structure. Now, could that be the nail in the coffin? It could be. I'm not saying it is, but I think that is very important to note in this structure is the whole buyout structure of the contract. Because Virginia Tech cannot afford to eat a $40-50 million buyout, or however that works. Sorry for the Wi-Fi issues, everyone. Try and work on that. We're a little bit constrained at this point. Make sure to dump questions in the live chat. We're trying to touch on those. James Franklin will get Virginia Tech to a level where we won't get left behind when the ACC collapses. I think that's a really big part of it. That Virginia, I mean, you look at these other quality coaches. I talked about a couple candidates. Let's just say Chesney, for example. This is someone who's, I think, going to have a very successful long head coaching career at a premier institution in the Power Four. I think he will land a job there. It's just where Virginia Tech sits, they can't really afford to have that slow build. And I think with him, especially if JMU, and I'm just saying now this is just one-off example, but a couple of these coaches that could be coaching down the stretch here, if JMU or another institution goes on a run into the playoff, your hands are so tied and you are so far behind the field on getting ahead for next year. So not only did you punt on this year, firing Pry 3 games into the year, if you wanted to make that move, you could have made a year ago in a more advantageous cycle, got your ducks in a row with the board aligned the way it was with the governor and however that shook out. So not only are you a year behind this year with the 2025 season, but then you'd probably most likely, unless you had that one in a million Kurt Signetti type year, punting on 26, and then all the eggs in the basket for 27. And if that doesn't pan out, TV contracts pretty much coming that next year, and you've lost all equity, all negotiating power. You've got a massive, massive investment in the athletics with nothing to show for it. That would be obviously the nightmare scenario. So I think that's why they've honed in on James Franklin. I mean, I feel like I've outlined the positives. I'm going through the chat to try and answer all the questions, but I feel like it's really just laid out there. You know, there's inside stuff coming out, and we're trying to relay that as much as possible, but most of the details are known. Most of the stuff is out there. It's just fully the ball's in his court, Jimmy Sexton, to see if they can get this deal pushed across the finish line. They've met the demands. I'm just looking through some of the notes I wrote down. I mean, the salary for the assistants, like when you pay him that much, is the salary pool going to be there? It sounds like it is. It sounds like space and everything and all the facilities, the infrastructure, the surrounding area for different needs of the family. It sounds like a lot of that lines up. It's just, doesn't get across the finish line. I know I was going through the chat. People are frustrated saying, you know, I'm pulling everyone's legs, saying I'm lying that like it's done, but that's just where things stand. And I don't know if I can be any more clear than that. I just think that's where things stand based on what I'm hearing. And that's not to take into account or disregard the fact that I think there's a ton of very positive things moving on. With staff members being contacted, recruits being contacted, the fact that he came in to the area twice to tour facilities and look around the region. But the ball's in the court, and we're going to follow this till it runs up. And this is obviously Virginia Tech not putting all their eggs or pushing all their chips in, but this is sort of that going almost going to use a phrase from the message board that one man army used, but not pretty much going back against the wall. And, you know, they're taking a big swing. We'll see how it works. But, yeah. If and when there is news on the hire, we will have an emergency Kolby's Corner. This is, you know, obviously Monday at 8:30 and Wednesday at 8:30 we typically go. The basketball game tonight sort of threw us off that cadence of people watching that. So I know I appreciate everyone saying they're expecting something here late from people. I wouldn't expect something tonight. But appreciate everyone jumping in here. Appreciate the concern. And we're going to try and devolve and give the most information we can as this search continues. I predict all but about 8 coaches are being fired. I don't know if it's going to go that much, but I think it does say a lot about the current state of college football just in general, where coaches at different places obviously haven't performed. You maybe have 3 years and you get the hook. I mean, even places like Franklin, where you've built up a ton of equity, they're much more willing to pull, yank you in this era, which is sort of crazy. Quick trigger finger, just having to move on. It's a very different game now. It's very insane. Like, you even see Josh Heupel getting calls for his head at Tennessee after the success that they've had. That, I mean, after the former days, they haven't really replicated at all. So it's a really crazy time. I mean, that's sort of besides the point of James Franklin and everything. But obviously see a lot of frustration in the chat, which I can empathize with. I know a lot of people are bought into this and invested. I appreciate all the support. I'm really not trying to drag anything out here. It's just sort of calling it like it is. Appreciate everyone in here. Sorry for the dead air. Just trying to go through the chat, trying to get to these questions live. I'm sorry, James and Sexton played you like a violin to just end up at Auburn. I didn't even know the super chat feature was turned on. Appreciate it, Big Marcus. Haven't seen that pop up before. That's cool. Sorry, James and Sexton. We'll see. I mean, I think Auburn, obviously, one of those candidates. Like I said, I've been on from the jump. Just talking to people in the personnel world, in my world of worlds, if I were to make the hire, it would probably be John Summerall down at Tulane. Just hearing what he's about, how he operates. Now, I do think he probably doesn't end up at Virginia Tech for a litany of different reasons. Obviously, I think Auburn's sort of in the catbird seat there. Now, maybe there could be some movement at LSU or different things. And I think that's someone Tech could send that, whatever, be in that next group for them. How realistic will that be? I doubt it. Maybe Auburn, a little outside the footprint, a little outside of a lot of different factors goes the route of James Franklin, but I wouldn't expect that at this point. Not exactly what we're hearing, but their search is also sort of up in the air. I saw their AD came out with different comments today on not about the timing but getting it right. So we'll see. We'll follow that. And maybe that's why this drags out. I don't think that is the main reason right now. Now that could be getting leverage. And I'm almost positive, obviously, that gets thrown in the face of different people. But I don't think that will be the largest limiting factor. 1 to 10 confidence rating, 1 not likely, 10 bet the house. I would say an 8. And I think that's kind of where it's at, just with a lot of the factors. What's been the interest level from players and recruits? I mean, everyone's very interested. Like I said, you feel calls from people who are more obviously involved in different elements of the search, and then you have people, obviously, that will be heavily affected by whichever way this goes. Like I said, with Franklin, you have a contingent of players that will follow him, both current on active rosters and guys who are also in the 26 and 27 ranks. I mean, very highly touted guys in the state of Virginia, guys in Maryland, the DMV, up to Pennsylvania. It's been very interesting, fielding different calls from players. And like I said, hearing as much that they were contacted, asking that they were talked to by Coach James Franklin on gauging their interest on if they'd follow them and their thoughts and perceptions of that. So I think you have to feel very positive in that regard that those conversations are being had. So I think there is interest there, 100%. What do you think about Neo and the basketball team? I didn't get to watch much of the game. I saw he had like 9 assists. I know people sort of freaked out after the first half, but I thought, they scored close to 100, almost held him under 60. Solid first performance. But to be honest, was leaning more into trying to get the best and most up-to-date scoops, not reading off a script. not withholding information on the deal, really just sort of calling it like it is. Sorry to frustrate some people. Any idea what final details maybe the sticking points out? This is a great question. A lot of this is going to be speculation. I would say buyout is going to be a really big part of that, just based on some conversations. I think the buyout is going to be a really big part of that. I know staff salary came up. I don't think there's going to be any issues with that. NIL came up early in the process. I don't think there's going to be any issues with that. It's really just about a lot of it. It's all there. So like, I don't know what final details. It's just how long is Virginia Tech going to wait? I think that is going to be the final details of how long can this drag out before it's just, okay, we got to move on. And it's like, do you pivot off that top option when you know it's at stake and he's clearly become your top option? So. Man, people got the teeth out in here. Any truth to the thought that Franklin wants input into who the next AD is? I could see that. I haven't honestly heard too much about that. But like I could see that being obviously when you do know that there's going to be a shakeup in the athletic department that you're stepping into, and you know you're going to have a new boss once you get hired. There's a little indecision there. Now, when you know you're going to be the highest paid employee in the state, that gives you a little bit of security and good feeling. But you want to know all your ducks in a row before you take a job. And I think that could be one element in this. That could be a little bit of a snag, obviously, with the athletic department going to face some shakeup there. So I think that could be big. But yeah. I really don't know what I'm censoring here. I feel like I've given pretty much everything as to what we're hearing. That's really just the level of where we're at. If Franklin does turn us down, would you go after Golish or Chesney next? Personally, like, I don't know where Golish will stand. I think Chesney would be great. Now, it's just when you take a step back and you look, like, I think Chesney's going to be a really great coach. And it's just kind of a shame Virginia Tech football, if you're looking at it from their lens and what they want and where college football is at right now, because I think Bob Chesney 10 years ago, and he still will be a home run hire. It's just a different game, especially where Virginia Tech stature has fallen to, and in a college football realm where you really have to produce pretty immediately, and especially in a place when you're in a conference like the ACC, when you're staring down realignment and different things. So I just think if you were to shoot there, it would be a much tougher pill to swallow for a lot of people involved, not only in the committee, but obviously the fans, the coaching staff, the players, because you would always know what was on the table with Franklin and obviously what you shot for. And there's no secret that was the top target. So I think that would be a big element of that. Appreciate the super chat. Like I said, I probably got to cut that off. I didn't even know that was an option here. What percentage do you think Franklin will be official? I would put it, like I said, 8 out of 10, close to probably 80%, 75, 80%. There's a lot of positive momentum that way, but it'd be too naive to obviously come on here and just fabricate something just for clicks or views. Like I'm not gonna do that. So as soon as I hear something, I will report it. It's just, there's a lot of positive momentum and you're trying to sift through a lot of different things because, everyone wants to be that person to say, gotcha, but it's just making sure you have the facts in order and trying to outline that in the best way. So I'm not controlled media. I'm not state-run media. Trust me, I'm not state-run media. It's where things are at. And I'm trying to shoot from the hip and lay it out there. But I would say I feel pretty confident about where things were 2.5 weeks ago and not even thinking it's possible to the conversations that are being had right now. I feel like in my heart of hearts is something that gets done. It's just the timeline. I know I've said that like 20 times now and people will take that with what they will, but I think that's just where things are. Wouldn't be opposed to getting the North Texas quarterback. Yeah, Mestemaker, I think he's going to get a lot of eyes in the portal. I looked at the next comment, but I think Messmaker's going to get a lot of eyes in the portal wherever he ends up. Obviously having a great season down there at North Texas with Eric Morris, who's probably going to get eyes as a head coach. So I definitely think he will. Not sure at Virginia Tech, but in general, yeah, he's having a good year. And the next question I'm scared to even click on. Best barbecue joint. Obviously a topic running rampant on the VT Scoop message board over the last couple of days. I'm gonna leave this up. I'm gonna leave this up for the paid message board when I answer this. I know Mission Barbecue was taking some licks. My favorite price is $3.99, so that's my favorite barbecue. But having an affinity for North Carolina, it's got to be Carolina style wherever it is. So I'll just leave it at that until we get into different joints, because tomorrow's a long day, and you'll never know what we'll have to talk about on the message board to fill the time. Apparently the NFL is getting played tonight. I didn't even think about that. So I appreciate everyone jumping in here for Kolby's Corner when obviously the NFL is going on Monday Night Football. I think the big question is who's going to be the next AD. I think that's really big too. That athletic CEO position, heard even earlier in the process, like I said, getting a lot of intel, and it feels like what happened a day ago was a week ago, and this time heard like they were maybe even closing in or had a list of different athletic CEO types that they had vetted it and thought about for the position. Haven't heard too much on that in the last week, maybe 10 days or so. Obviously, as a lot of the heat on the stove is turned up on James Franklin and the coaching search. So I think that's sort of where that's at. But yeah, it's going to be really big. I think if you want to look past sort of all the stuff we touched on in here, that could be one snag. It's like, or just a sticking point where it's like, okay, yeah, all sounds good, but need to have that in order. So. If they do hire Franklin, at least our first few games will be on a better network than the CW. And I think like as much of a joke that could be, that is a really big factor in it. When you look at the revenue distribution, obviously being tied to eyeballs, getting James Franklin pretty much immediately raises Virginia Tech's stature, not only in that regard, football team results on the field, but also its product ability, ability to show it on larger network games. And I mean, look at the ACC. This is sort of pivoting off the TV discussion, but the ACC have not the best showing this year. Florida State's down, Clemson's down. Now you have Pitt maybe punching a little bit above its weight. You have UVA punching above its weight class. You have Miami down, SMU sort of hanging around, Georgia Tech's up. So this is somewhere where you can project James Franklin, if he brings a lot of his luggage with him, to be able to turn around relatively quickly with a lot of those pillars still in place here. But yeah, that's definitely a really big aspect, and needing to draw more eyeballs. I've used this analogy a lot. Obviously, college football teams are a lot like a business now, and they always have been. I mean, universities have always been a money-making business, but especially brands in college football. How do you make them the most valuable? And that's really what it's all about. How do you sell the most valuable brand? You have to raise the value first. So doing that, obviously, through TV, on the field, tickets, that's a whole different thing. But yeah. Sorry about the Wi-Fi. We will try to work through that. We'll see how much we can do. Usually it's about half and half. So at least we have a stream tonight. It looks like we got an open application of producers in the chat. I might have to go back through that. Yeah, it's a good question. Outside of Mines, who would stick? And I think this is important. I think Fontel, obviously, James Franklin, I don't know if I might have touched on this in the last live, but obviously no one heard it. James Franklin obviously reached out to Fontel Mines once, maybe even a couple times to try and lure him up to Happy Valley to go be on staff up there before Higgins went with them. So they have a great relationship. I wouldn't be surprised if that were to be the hire. I honestly was sort of doing some channeling right before the show, trying to confirm if those conversations have already happened directly there. Outside of Mines, I think really the position that is the most important is the offensive line and Matt Moore. I think I also touched on this in the last show, but obviously no audio. I think having continuity along that offensive line is really important. And you have a good core there of Kyle Altuner, Lath, some of those other young prospects, Aiden Lynch, Gavin Crawford, some other names there that have promise, and someone where you've seen the instability at the offensive line going from Rudolph to Crook to now Moore, and how detrimental that can be. So I think Moore would be one, because you want to keep a lot of those bodies in there and not have to sort of race through the portal. So I think that'd be big. Yep. Yeah, that's sort of what I just touched on, as I saw that right under. Seeing comments, I would just stay locked into vtscoop.com. I feel pretty confident in our reporting, and I would just stay locked in over there. Try and shoot straight. I know there's frustration in people. Really, I feel like I've been upfront as possible. So just leave it at that and rest easy knowing that. Are we getting LED lights for the stadium? That'll be interesting to see. Obviously, I know Tennessee's entrance made a really big stir on social media the last couple of days. And Doug Bowman, right before the game on Saturday, when I was still, it was Saturday morning, still trying to catch up on all the multiple, it feels like 100-page threads over there on VT Scoop, dropped the request for the first RFP, I believe, for the video board. It'll be interesting to see what they use with those other one-time funds, if they go to LED lights, if they go to heating the indoor, different projects, the multi-use, whatever district down there, if they look into that. It'll be interesting, but I think this is something that we'll have to watch for, and I'm sure VT Scoop and Doug Bowman will have it for you first. But that's definitely something they've looked into and something to see. Man, I wouldn't change this live chat for anything. I appreciate everyone in here. So much nuance and jokes in the comments. Reported that Board has met all of his Franklin's demands, and now it's up to him. This is true. If I recall, last Monday or Wednesday show, that's sort of what we said on here. So really not much has changed in that regard of meeting his demands, and the ball's been in his court. So appreciate the support. Make sure to stay subscribed. But I don't think that was prevalent or new to tonight's info. But I mean, circling back, that's where things have stood on those negotiations. People talking about Arians on the Pat McAfee show tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just there's a lot, and I'm not dancing around things here. It's just, I mean, it'd be like with anything, with recruiting, you can always, there's big people that would have movement, and I just don't see it happening, because as soon as you hear from someone in the know, you would think you would have really positive movement. It's sort of shut down. So I think it's positive. It's just the timeline is going to be so big, and we're monitoring that. You see someone saying it's going to happen at basketball tonight, when I don't know. It's just and I know the message board, obviously, Mayhole, CZY, different people going in there and saying different things, and people running rampant with that. It's going to be really interesting to see here down the stretch. On the ball is in Sexton's court, and we're all just sort of trying to follow that. So that's where things stand. Not ignoring you. Trying to get to everyone. So there we go. Do you think a deal could be agreed to and announced before the FSU game? So November 15th, I could 100% see a deal getting agreed to and announced before the FSU game. I'm not so sure that it will. I mean, I feel pretty good about that right now with Franklin. I'll probably get harangued if it obviously doesn't happen at this point now with what I've said, but based on all the intel that we're hearing to the point, you got to feel great about where Virginia Tech stands. They've left nothing on the table, and before November 15th, that would 100% be within Virginia Tech's timeline. It would 100% align with exactly what Virginia Tech wants. Is that what James Franklin and Jimmy Sexton want to do? Maybe. And that's where we're at. So we're reporting all the stuff that we can on different circumstances popping up, but it really comes down to that same point. Virginia Tech has left nothing on the table, and it's up to James Franklin and Jimmy Sexton to make this call here down the stretch. It's kind of everything's pushing in the middle. But that's not to say they don't have backup options. Any chance with Sabian Hyder? Obviously, out of Louisa, Sabian Hyder, 5-star running back, had good traction there at Penn State. Something that could be interesting to monitor. Obviously, Penn State has really good running backs, especially from the Virginia region. You talk about Katron Allen, Fat Man from Maury High School in Norfolk. He's obviously recruited really good running backs, Nick Singleton. So that would be one to watch. I haven't heard too much smoke on that right now. Like I said, you can only put so much stock in recruiting different players before an announcement is made, or there's really more to go behind that. But a lot more players that have been way off the board come back into focus if you do land James Franklin. Like if the timeline lines up that they do get it at a time, that signing day could look a whole lot different than what was even projected a week and a half ago on what could be possible for the 26 signing class, let alone the transfer portal. Appreciate all the support, everyone. It means a ton. If you missed it, make sure to go back and watch it. The beginning part just tried to layer some context to this whole story. Trying to hear everyone's input here. See the Calci talk. Oh, man. Well, it's been a busy night fielding different calls and things, but appreciate everyone jumping in here. Sort of lost it down the stretch there with the comments, but like I said, it's been a ton of fun getting the show going, figuring out along the way. Here, we'll get one more. Who else is in play realistically for Franklin? I mean, you watch FSU. I think that's the biggest one to watch down the stretch. It's just Florida State and what they're willing to do and how that goes. Like, obviously, Norvell won last week. A lot was made of that result on Saturday. I would say that would be one of the last realistic spots. Maybe South Carolina with what goes on with Beamer, and I think that's maybe where some fear is drawn from the committee and different people thinking games are being played, trying to place different coaches, different places. But I think I touched on as much intel that is prudent to the situation as possible. The support means everything. Still growing, still figuring this whole thing out, but appreciate all the support and everyone who's riding with us. Make sure to stay tuned in. Have another show Wednesday night. Going to be a slow week, obviously, with the bye week. Actually, funnily enough, heading up to Happy Valley this weekend to go watch Penn State play some football against Indiana. So should be a busy weekend, even though not obviously on the field with Virginia Tech football. But like I said, it means the world. I get to do this. It's been a ton of fun getting this going. Still learning, still going. Going to try and get some better Wi-Fi. Going to try and cut a better show for everyone. But I mean, this is where we are. Going to lay it out as clearly as we can. Follow the Saga. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Follow the socials. As soon as we hear some concrete information, we will have it on vtscoop.com. Have it on X at Kolby_Crawford. And we'll be going live here as soon as we hear news on anything regarding the coaching search. So appreciate all the support. It truly does mean the world. It really does. So God bless everyone. Have a great rest of your week. It's Monday. Let's have a great week. And we'll see you on Wednesday night at 8:30. Appreciate it.